I'd love it if you talk just a little bit more about the decision to embrace Solana and bringing that functionality to FTX.
Yeah, and I think there's sort of like there's a complicated version of it and there's a simple version of it. And the simple version of it, which I think is like relevant to start with, sort of, because I do think that the simple version of it contains a lot of the important nuggets of it. Um, the simple version of it is sort of almost just like, well, like it's if we want to really grow out the industry a ton, like if we want to 20x the size of the industry, there's going to be 20x as many transactions. Like it's just like almost certainly going to happen. That would follow, and then you just be like, well, all right, like what sort of TPS would that require? And you're like, yeah, a million, a million transactions a second, and just like immediately you're like, oh shit, like that means that like actively used assets are going to need a blockchain to transport on that can support a million TPS. And there's like almost none that have even the ambition of getting there. I think Solana is one of the very few, and that's really where it came from. Like it came from really that simple of sort of a quote unquote inspiration of just like, oh shit, like there's, I guess you kind of don't have much of a choice about that one. Like, it's going to be, uh, if you're not going to do that, there's sort of not, you, you're just kind of screwed. And, uh, and so that sort of is where it started. And then, when we sort of thought more about it, we're like, well, in order to have interoperability between platforms, they need to be supporting the same blockchains. And, that means that like as an exchange, we have to be thinking about what chains you can transport things on through FTX. Like that's an important part of this. And that means that like we have to be playing an active role in finding, sufficient chains that will have the throughput that people are going to need, that'll have the economics people are going to need. And so that sort of is what led us to getting excited to support Solana, not just for Solana itself, but like, there's going to be the same questions about all chains. And I think like adopting as many interoperable standards as we can is just really going to help that.
I love that. And it brings me back to early 2020 when we at Exodus, we like to think about creating mainstream DeFi experiences. And so early on, we were thinking like, okay, one of the most popular lending platforms on Ethereum, Compound Finance, we thought, well, let's bring that experience and natively integrate it into Exodus so that people can deposit their DAI US dollar stablecoin balance into Compound and earn an interest rate on that balance. But what happened was, everybody knows where this story pretty much is going with the summer of 2020, the summer of DeFi, it became so damn expensive in Ethereum gas
Yep.
fees to deposit or withdraw. And so we had to go back to the drawing board and think like, how can we create mainstream DeFi experiences? And that's why we got so excited by Solana.
Yeah, it's just like something like that. Something somehow like that almost has to happen. Like there has to be some way forward here, where where things can scale the way that it's now becoming clear they're going to need to.
Right. Do you guys have plans to integrate other blockchains like Solana in the way that you've integrated Solana? Or I thought I saw something maybe with Binance Smart Chain, but I'm not sure. Do you guys have other plans?
Yeah, so we do support BSC for some assets. I think we support them for all of the assets that like are kind of Binance native, and I think maybe for a few others as well. And we've been thinking about other chains. I think we're slowly tacking more on. Obviously, like there's some dev work involved every time we want to add a new blockchain because it's and it's just like it takes work, it takes time. But whatever, it's not the end of the world. And so we have been growing those out, and I think we'll continue to. And a lot of this is just like, do we have a bridge we can trust there? Like that's a big part of
Right.
us feeling comfortable with it. And I think everywhere that we do feel like we have that are going to be places that we're going to be potentially looking to support.
So I have this vision for the future of creating an experience where a person can exchange essentially any digital asset for any other digital asset, whether it's a crypto asset, whether it's a stock, Bitcoin for Tesla, Tesla for digitized barrel of
Yep.
oil for a crypto punk. What do you think needs to happen for that future to become a reality? Do you think that multi-chain is the future, or do you think it's going to eventually everybody's going to converge upon one chain like Solana, or how are you thinking about this?
So I don't know for sure, and I certainly don't want to express extreme confidence about this, but I'm definitely sort of in the camp that thinks that there's like substantial reasons to think that it might be more of a sort of one chain world than I think that like people often expect. And I think a lot of this is like, well, you know, interoperability is just really hard between chains, right? And so if everything is split between 28 different chains, then you start running into this problem pretty quickly where like um you uh sure you have like two people both claim that they have the same asset, but like if you can't actually move it from one to the other, it raises this question of in what sense they are the same asset, in what sense they are actually interoperable. And I think often the answer is that they're sort of not. And that's tough. It's tough, and you can't have DeFi really natively handling that. And so, really, what I think, what I think is something closer to like, well, I think within a realm, I think that if you're looking at like, well, how about like, within financial, like within DeFi, I think you might have like one or two chains that really dominate. You could imagine that for like social media, maybe it's not super important for it to be deeply integrated with DeFi. And so maybe you end up in a world where that's using something else. Although I do think there's still cost to that. But I think that's a possibility. But yeah, I basically think that like things like my guess is things are going to be like decently concentrated in terms of chains.
Yeah, for us, what we're trying to think about is like, okay, if we have, like, let's say, somebody has Bitcoin in their wallet on the Bitcoin blockchain, and then they
Yep.
also have, let's say, Bitcoin on Solana, there's some UX challenges there. Because
Yep.
if a person then all of a sudden is like, okay, I'm going to deposit my Bitcoin into an exchange or service to buy something or what a trade or whatever, and the service is saying like, here's your Bitcoin address, and I have Bitcoin on Solana, that becomes confusing for a customer. So then for us, we think
Yep.
about like, okay, can we integrate things like Wormhole, Thorchain, and
Yep.
can we even chain these experiences together so that a customer, when they want to deposit Bitcoin they have Bitcoin on Solana and they want to deposit it into that service in Bitcoin, we can create an experience where a customer doesn't really have to think about what chain they're on.
Yep, and I think that that absolutely sounds like the ideal, and I think that also gets the importance of bridges. That if you're gonna have, a multi-chain world, you need to have good bridges between the chains.
Yes.
Otherwise, you have a non-interoperable multi-chain world, and that is just a total mess.
Right, right. How are you, speaking of these bridges, how are you feeling about the state of Wormhole, RenVM, Thorchain? Are there any bridges that you're really excited about and that work really well?
I think it's tough, and I think that like in particular, and I won't say this is true of all of them, but I think that for most of them, you look at these sort of like decentralized bridges, and they're actually kind of centralized. Like it's just a guy there with a wallet, which is okay. I don't
Yeah.
I don't think necessarily we should say it's bad to have a centralized bridge, but I think we should be upfront about the fact that many of these are basically centralized, and that means that they can't. They're not really on-chain activities, which is okay. But it means you want to have trust with the parties that are bridging them, and so I think that like I think that we're starting to move towards a few examples. I think Wormhole is a more decentralized version of it, which is super cool. Um, But yeah, I think for most of them, we should just be aware that they're more centralized than I think they often advertise.